A poor girl finds a millionaire locked in the trunk of a car. She tries to save him, but when he sees her face, he says, "You look exactly like my daughter." What happens next changes her life forever. The biting cold of dawn spread among the abandoned cars as the fog covered the junkyard on the outskirts of the city. A raven landed on the dented roof of a black sedan, its core echoing in the silence. Something moved inside the rusty vehicle. Inside the slightly open trunk, Miles Donovan struggled to breathe. His wrists, bound with industrial duct tape, were raw from rubbing against the metal. Dried blood had formed a crust on his temple, and every breath sent a wave of pain through his ribs. He had no idea how long he'd been there, but the sky had already brightened for the second time. "Help!" he tried to shout, but his parched throat could only manage a hoarse groan. The businessman closed his eyes, trying to recall how he had ended up there. He remembered the meeting with Raymond, his business partner, the empty parking lot, a blow to the head. Then just flashes, a dark warehouse, voices arguing over money, and someone saying, "Donovan won't be a problem for much longer." A noise of falling cans made him open his eyes. Outside, a small shadow moved between the cars. Miles's heart started racing. Could it be one of the men coming back to finish the job? But they were not the heavy footsteps of an adult. A child appeared in front of him, her eyes wide with surprise at finding a man in the trunk. She was a small girl with messy brown hair and worn-out clothes. She carried a backpack almost bigger than herself. "Please, help me," he whispered, fearing any sudden movement might scare her away. She hesitated, looking around as if to make sure she was alone. "You're hurt," said the girl, approaching cautiously. "Was it bad people who did this to you?" Miles nodded, feeling his throat tighten. "I need to get out of here." The girl set her backpack on the ground and, surprisingly, began to untie the knots with agile fingers. "I can do it. Grandma taught me how to make strong knots when we need them." While she worked, Miles could not take his eyes off the child's focused face. There was something familiar about her, something that made his heart beat faster. The morning light illuminated the child's features, revealing a small crescent-shaped scar just above her right eyebrow. "Done!" The girl managed to free his hands and stepped back a little. "Can you get out on your own?" Miles tried to move, but his muscles protested after being confined for so long. He groaned in pain. "Wait, I'll help you," she said, extending her small hands. With effort and the child's surprising strength, Miles managed to crawl out of the trunk, collapsing onto the ground with a dull thud. The sunlight, even filtered by the fog, made his eyes water. When he finally managed to focus his vision, he looked straight into the girl's face and could not contain his exclamation, "You look exactly like my daughter." The girl stepped back, startled by the intensity in his voice. "I'm sorry," Miles said quickly. "I didn't mean to scare you. It's just that you look so much like someone I know." The child studied him for a moment, tilting her head to one side in a gesture that made Miles's heart clench even more. "You have a little daughter?" she asked, curiosity overcoming her apprehension. "Yes," Miles answered, his voice choked. "What's your name?" The girl shook her head. "Grandma says I shouldn't tell my name to strangers." "Your grandmother seems wise," Miles commented, trying to earn the child's trust. "Where is she?" "Far from here. We live—" She stopped suddenly, as if she had already said too much. "I need to get help for you. There's a road just over there." "Wait!" Miles tried to stand, but the pain stopped him. "How can I find you again?" The girl had already picked up her backpack. "I come here sometimes. Grandma needs stuff from the trash." The distant sound of an engine made her look back, tense like a wild animal. "I'll bring help," she said decisively. "Stay here." Before Miles could say anything else, she darted between the cars with the agility of someone who knew the place well. In seconds, she had disappeared into the fog that still hovered over the junkyard. Miles tried to call out to her, but his voice failed. He leaned against an abandoned car, his heart pounding. Those eyes, that scar, the way she tilted her head. It couldn't be. Or could it? Minutes later, he heard a honk on the nearby road. Male voices approached, shouting. The girl had kept her promise. "Here," he shouted, with what little strength he had left. "I'm here." Two truckers appeared among the cars. "Man, you're in bad shape," one of them exclaimed. A little girl was by the roadside, saying there was a hurt man in here. "The girl," Miles murmured. "Where is she?" "She vanished," said the other man, pulling out his phone. "I'll call an ambulance." Miles felt consciousness slipping away. The last thing he thought of before passing out was the child's face, so similar to someone he knew well. The bright, antiseptic light of the hospital made Miles blink several times until his eyes adjusted. A heart monitor beeped rhythmically at his side. "Welcome back, Mr. Donovan." The nurse adjusted the IV. "You were lucky. The truckers who found you said there was a child shouting on the road, asking for help." Miles tried to sit up. "The girl, where is she?" "We don't know. When the ambulance arrived, there was no one else there besides you." He let his head fall back on the pillow. It wasn't a hallucination. The girl was real. 2 days passed before the doctors allowed him to be discharged. The police, who had taken a brief initial statement, now wanted a full report. At the station, Miles sat in front of Detective Harris, a middle-aged man with deep under-eye circles. "So, Mr. Donovan, let's go over this from the beginning. You believe your partner, Raymond Beckett, was involved in your kidnapping?" Miles nodded, running his hand over the bandage on his temple. "We had a meeting the night before. Raymond wanted me to sell my share of the company to an investor group. I refused." Harris wrote down every word. "And then? I left the office late. The parking lot was empty. Someone hit me from behind." Miles closed his eyes. "I heard voices talking about money, about the company, it's about getting rid of me." "Did you recognize any voice?" "Not for sure." "I was confused." The detective slid a cup of water toward him. "And how did you end up in the junkyard?" "I don't know. I woke up already inside the trunk." Miles took a sip of water. Then she appeared. "The child you mentioned earlier." "A girl, small." Miles hesitated. "She untied me. She seemed to know exactly what she was doing." "Could you describe this child?" "Brown hair, thin, old clothes." Miles took a deep breath. "And she had a scar above her right eyebrow, shaped like a crescent moon." Harris frowned, jotting down details. "And did she say anything, a name, where she came from?" "She didn't give me her name. She mentioned a grandmother, and that she sometimes comes to the junkyard to find things." Miles leaned forward. "Detective, I need to find this girl." "Why?" "Besides gratitude, of course." Miles felt his palms grow sweaty. Should he tell? They would think he was crazy, traumatized by the kidnapping. Maybe he was. "When I looked at her," Miles hesitated. "She looks exactly like my daughter. Identical, the same eyes, the same way of tilting her head, even the scar in the same place." Harris studied him for a moment, his expression neutral. "Mr. Donovan, the trauma could—" "I'm not confused," Miles interrupted. "I know what I saw. It was like looking at my own daughter's face." The detective sighed, making another note. "I'll make a note for patrol units to keep an eye out for a child fitting this description," he said. "But our priority right now is to investigate your kidnapping and the possible link to your partner." Miles nodded, knowing it wouldn't help to insist further at that moment, but the girl's image wouldn't leave his mind. "May I go?" he asked, feeling exhausted. "For now, yes. But don't leave town, Mr. Donovan. We'll need more statements." Miles left the station for the cool afternoon air. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. People passed by him, busy with their own lives, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside him. As he walked toward the taxi waiting for him, a certainty grew within him. This was not just some random coincidence. He had to find that girl again, no matter the cost. For the first time in a long while, something besides business occupied his thoughts. The mysterious girl, the face so familiar, the eyes that seemed to recognize him without knowing who he was. Where there had once been only the emptiness of routine, now there was something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The taxi dropped Miles at the entrance of the property. The gravel path crunched under his feet as he walked up the long driveway that led to the mansion. 2 years ago, the trees lining the way had been pruned into artistic shapes. Now they grew untamed, with no one to care for them properly. Miles barely noticed these details. The mansion rose before him, imposing and empty. 3 stories of pale stone and huge windows that, from a distance, looked like opaque eyes watching his return. The garden lights flicked on automatically at his presence, but the effect did not make the place any more welcoming. Miles entered the code on the electronic lock and pushed the heavy front door. The alarm beeped, and he quickly typed in the password. Silence returned, broken only by the distant hum of the climate control system. "I'm home," he murmured to no one. His footsteps echoed across the marble floors of the entrance hall. To his right, the living room remained exactly as it was the day before his kidnapping. Italian leather sofas, Persian rugs, artwork on the walls. On the left, the dining room with a table for 12 people that had never seated more than 3. He climbed the stairs without turning on the lights. He knew every step, every curve of the banister. On the upper floor, he passed his own bedroom and continued down the hallway to the last door. He paused with his hand on the doorknob, took a deep breath, and entered. Anne's room remained untouched. The walls were a soft shade of yellow, floral curtains, the bed made with the patchwork quilt the housekeeper insisted on keeping clean even after the accident. On the study desk, the schoolbooks were stacked as if their owner might return at any moment to finish her homework. Miles didn't turn on the lights when he entered there. He preferred the dimness, as if fully illuminating the room might erase the memories that still lingered in the air. He went to the built-in closet and slid open the doors. The faint scent of lavender still clung, weak but persistent, thanks to the sachets the housekeeper replaced monthly. He moved some hangers aside and knelt before a small digital safe in the back of the closet. He typed in Anne's date of birth, and the door opened with a metallic click. Inside was a blue folder labeled Accident, handwritten. Miles carried the folder to the study desk and spread out its contents. Police reports, forensic findings, newspaper clippings, photos of the wrecked car after it had been pulled from the river. He knew every document by heart, but he still reviewed them periodically, hoping to catch some detail he might have missed in the hundreds of previous readings. The vehicle apparently lost control on the curve of the Westwood Bridge, broke through the guardrail and fell into the river at 10:37 p.m., read the police report. Weather conditions, heavy rain, visibility, reduced. Miles ran his fingers over the photograph of the smashed car, a BMW X5 he had purchased with safety in mind. A cruel irony. Despite intensive searches by divers over a 2-week period, the body of the miner Anne Donovan, 11 years, was not found, read another document. Given the strong river current on the night of the accident, it is believed the body could have been swept out to sea. He pushed the papers aside and picked up a brown envelope. From inside, he took out more photographs. Anne smiling on her 10th birthday. Anne riding her first pony. Anne at the beach, building sandcastles. In all of them, the small crescent-shaped scar above her right eyebrow was visible. Identical, Miles whispered. Exactly identical. Suddenly, he stood and went to the dresser by the bed. He opened the top drawer and moved aside a few carefully folded pieces of clothing. At the bottom lay a small blue velvet box. Opening it, the silvery shine of a necklace caught the faint light entering through the window. A delicate, gleaming star pendant. Miles held it in the palm of his hand, feeling its negligible weight, which paradoxically seemed to carry the entire weight of the world. "Your lucky necklace," he murmured, recalling the day he had bought it for Anne. She had insisted she needed a star to hold her wishes. Since then, she had never taken it off. Except, Miles closed his eyes. The necklace had been found in the car, caught in the seatbelt, broken, as if it had been torn away violently during the impact. It was the only physical proof that Anne had been in the vehicle on that fateful night. He sat back on the bed, holding the star necklace tightly in his hand. The metal seemed to pulse, warm against his skin, as if it were trying to communicate something. The image of the girl in the junkyard came back in full force. The same eyes, the same mannerisms, the same scar. What if... Miles could barely form the thought, afraid that simply giving it shape in words might destroy it. What if she's still alive? The silence of the room seemed to swallow his question. But something had changed in the air, a different energy. as if the mansion walls, which for so long echoed only his solitude, were now pulsing with something new. Miles gripped the star necklace firmly, leaving its imprint on the palm of his hand. For 2 years, he had mourned in silence, managing companies, attending meetings, living mechanically. On the outside, the pragmatic businessman who had overcome the tragedy. Inside, a father who had never stopped searching for answers. Now, for the first time, he felt the answers might be coming to him. "I'll find you," he promised the empty room, as if Anne could hear him. "If you're out there somewhere, and I will find you." He put the necklace into his pocket and began to gather the documents scattered on the desk. But he didn't return them to the safe. Instead, he placed everything in his work briefcase. He would need these papers. On his way out, he took one last look at Anne's room. For the first time in 2 years, he turned on the light, flooding the space with brightness. It was time to dispel the shadows. Early the next morning, Miles drove to the junkyard. The sky was clear, without the fog that had covered the place on the day of his rescue. The desolate landscape of rusted cars looked even sadder in the direct sunlight. He parked at the entrance and began walking through the rows of abandoned vehicles. The place was larger than he had imagined, a maze of twisted metal and shattered glass. Each step was cautious. Fragments of glass and sharp pieces of metal threatened his expensive shoes. Miles found the black sedan where he had been imprisoned. It looked smaller now, less menacing in daylight. The trunk was still ajar, the tape that had bound him lying on the dirt floor. "Anyone here?" he called, his voice echoing among the metal scraps. Only the distant buzzing of insects answered. Miles sat on an old tire under the shade of a van with no windows. He took the star necklace from his pocket and held it up to the light, observing how the sun's rays danced on the polished metal. He waited for hours. Occasionally, he walked through the junkyard looking for any signs the girl had been there. He found small footprints in some places, but nothing conclusive. As the sun began to set, he returned to his car, leaving on the tire where he had been sitting a small package with a sandwich and a bottle of water. The next morning, he returned at dawn. The package had disappeared. Someone had been there. Miles's heart quickened, but he kept his excitement in check. It could have been anyone: scrap collectors, homeless people, staff. 3 times a day for 2 days, Miles went back to the junkyard. Each time he left food in different spots, like leaving breadcrumbs for a wary bird. Each time he returned, he found the packages gone, but never saw who had taken them. On the 3rd morning, he changed tactics. Instead of staying in the junkyard, he drove around the surrounding area. It was a poor neighborhood, with small businesses, modest houses, and some abandoned buildings. Miles entered every store, every diner, every gas station, showing a photo of Anne and asking if anyone had seen a girl who looked like her. The answers were always no, often accompanied by suspicious glances at his expensive suit and luxury watch. He clearly did not belong. "Looking for your daughter, huh?" asked a middle-aged woman at the corner bakery as she packed his bread. "Something like that," Miles replied vaguely. "There are plenty of kids no one looks for around here," she commented, handing him the bag. "And a few that someone looks for a bit too much, if you catch my drift." Miles understood the insinuation. He was a rich stranger asking questions about a child. He nodded politely, paid, and left, feeling defeated. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, while driving slowly down the main avenue, something caught his eye. Behind a small grocery store, near a row of industrial dumpsters, a little figure rummaged through the trash. Miles parked quickly and approached on foot, his heart hammering in his chest. It was definitely a child. Brown hair, worn clothes, moving swiftly and precisely as she sorted what looked like metal and cardboard. He stopped a few yards away, not wanting to scare her. "Hello," he called softly. The girl turned around with a start, and Miles knew instantly it was her. The same eyes, the same face, the same crescent-shaped scar. For a moment, he thought she would run. Her muscles were tense, like a wild animal ready to flee. But then something in her gaze changed. Recognition, perhaps. "You're the man from the trunk," she said, her small voice firm. Miles nodded, staying where he was. "You helped me. You saved my life." The girl shrugged, as if freeing a man who was tied up was just another everyday chore. "Thank you," he continued. "I wanted to thank you properly." "No need," she replied, turning her attention back to the items she was collecting. Metal pieces, cans, some copper wires. "My name is Miles Donovan." He took a cautious step closer. "What's yours?" The girl hesitated, looking around as if checking to see if anyone else was near. Then, with the innocence particular to children who haven't fully learned self-preservation, she answered, "Josie. My name is Josie." "Josie," Miles repeated, as if savoring the sound. "That's a pretty name." She studied him with curious eyes. "Why were you looking for me?" Miles felt momentarily flustered. How do you know I was looking for you?" Josie gave him a slight smile, a smile that made Miles's stomach clench. "You left food, and you asked about me in the stores. The lady at the bakery is Grandma's friend." Miles almost laughed. The neighborhood had its own communication network, invisible to him. "You must be hungry," he said, noticing how thin she was. "We could get something to eat if you want. Over there." He pointed to a diner across the street, staying in plain view in a public space. Josie thought for a moment, her face showing distrust warring with hunger. "You can bring it here," she finally said. "I need to finish this before Grandma comes back." Miles nodded, understanding the message. She did not trust him enough to go anywhere with him. "What do you like to eat?" "Hamburgers," Josie answered promptly, "with fries and a chocolate milkshake." He smiled. "Deal. Don't go away." 15 minutes later, they were sitting on overturned crates near the dumpsters. Josie devoured the hamburger while Miles watched her, unable to take his eyes off her. Every movement, every expression felt both familiar and strange at the same time. "Why were you in that car?" Josie asked between bites. "Bad men put me there," Miles answered simply. Josie nodded, as though that made perfect sense. "There are good people and bad people in the world. Grandma always says that. Your grandmother seems wise." "She is," Josie confirmed, swallowing the last bit of her hamburger. "I have to go now. She'll be worried." Miles felt a pang in his chest. He didn't want her to leave, but he knew he couldn't force anything. "Josie," he called after her as she got up, "if you want to see me again, I'll be here tomorrow." "Same time?" The girl studied him for a long moment, her eyes surprisingly deep for someone so young. There was something there, not just distrust, but a kind of inexplicable recognition. "Maybe," she finally replied, gathering the metal pieces she'd sorted. "Thanks for the burger." Miles watched as she walked away, carrying her little bag full of junkyard finds. He didn't follow her, though every fiber of his being wanted not to let her go. The silence that remained between them felt charged with something neither could explain, a connection beyond words, a sense that, in some strange, unexplainable way, they already knew each other. As he drove back home that night, Miles felt lighter than he had in years. The star necklace in his pocket seemed warm, pulsing with possibilities. "Josie," he repeated to himself. "Josie." The name wasn't Anne, but the face, the eyes, the scar. Everything else was identical. Miles arrived early at the same spot the next day. He brought hot coffee in a thermos and a bag of fresh bread from the bakery, where the older woman had mentioned she knew Josie's grandmother. Next door at the diner, he ordered 2 more hamburgers and milkshakes, placing them on a clean box he found near the dumpsters. Then he sat on the hood of his car to wait. The city's hustle and bustle grew around him. Grocery store employees arrived for the morning shift. Delivery trucks unloaded goods. Ordinary people began their daily routines. Miles checked his phone. Dozens of messages from the office, all ignored. For the first time in years, business could wait. Slowly, the aroma of coffee drifted through the morning air, mixing with the less pleasant smells of the alley. Miles glanced at his watch every few minutes, wondering if Josie would actually show up, or if yesterday's maybe was just a polite goodbye. It was when the sun was already high in the sky that a movement caught his attention. This time, it wasn't just one small figure, but 2 people approaching. Josie walked in front, occasionally hopping between steps, her worn backpack bouncing against her back. Behind her, An elderly woman walked upright despite her evident age, her face lined with time. "You really came," Josie exclaimed when she saw him, her childlike voice carrying genuine surprise that tugged at Miles's heart. "I promised, didn't I?" He smiled, avoiding any sudden movements. His gaze shifted to the woman who stopped a few steps away, a cautious expression on her wrinkled face. "This is my grandma," Josie introduced, pointing to the woman. "I told her about you, and she wanted to meet you." Miles rose from the hood and walked carefully closer, keeping a respectful distance. "Mom, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Miles Donovan." He extended his hand politely. "Your granddaughter, Josie. She saved my life." The woman studied him for a moment before accepting his handshake. Her hands were calloused, marks of a life of hard work. "Martha Ellis," she said, her voice steady despite her age. "Josie said a man in a suit left food for her yesterday. I figured I should see for myself." There was something noble in Martha's bearing, even in her simple, worn-out clothes, a dignity that rose above her circumstances. "I brought coffee and bread," Miles offered, pointing to the items he had set on the box. "And more hamburgers." "Josie seemed to like them yesterday." "I love hamburgers," the girl confirmed, already heading eagerly toward the packages. "Grandma, he bought milkshakes too." Martha watched her granddaughter with a faint smile before turning her attention back to Miles. "Why are you doing this, Mr. Donovan? People like you don't usually mingle with people like us unless they have a reason." The directness of the question did not surprise Miles. He had expected distrust. "Your granddaughter saved my life," he repeated simply. "I was tied up, hurt, left to die. Josie found me and freed me. I just want to repay her kindness." Martha studied him for another moment, as if gauging the sincerity of his words. Josie, oblivious to the tension between the adults, had already sat down on the box and was happily opening the hamburger wrapper. "Grandma, come eat," she called. "It's still warm." Martha hesitated, but then gave in, moving to sit near her granddaughter. Miles sensed that her resistance weakened when it came to Josie's well-being. "Do you and Josie live around here?" Miles asked, trying not to sound intrusive. "We have our place," Martha replied vaguely, accepting the coffee he offered. "It's not much, but it's ours." "We live under the overpass," Josie chimed in cheerfully between hamburger bites. "Grandma made a home with cardboard and tarps. It's warm when it rains." Martha shot a warning look at her granddaughter, but it was too late. "The overpass on Parkwood Avenue?" Miles asked, recognizing the reference. It was a known area for homeless camps, less than a mile from there. "Josie has a vivid imagination," Martha tried to dismiss, but her eyes betrayed the truth. "It's not imagination, it's true," Josie insisted. "We live there with Mr. Pete and Ms. Rosa. Some other people too, but they're the nice ones." Miles felt a tightening in his chest. The thought that this child, who might be his Anne, was living under a highway overpass was too painful to contemplate. "Do you have any help?" "Social services, shelters." Martha straightened her shoulders, her pride evident. "We don't need charity, Mr. Donovan. We manage." "I didn't mean to offend," Miles said quickly. "It's just that Josie's a child. She deserves—" "The best," Martha interrupted, a defiant glint in her eyes. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't give her everything I can?" Miles backed off mentally, realizing he had touched a raw nerve. "Of course. I'm sorry." Josie, sensing the tension, intervened with the natural ease of a child. "Grandma is the best. She teaches me everything. And when we find good stuff in the trash, she sells it and buys food." The simplicity with which Josie described her hard life touched Miles deeply. There was an incredible resilience in this child, a capacity to find joy in the smallest things despite adversity. "Grandma makes delicious soup with leftovers, we find," Josie continued enthusiastically. "And sometimes, when there's a fair at the park, we go there and people hand out candy and hot dogs." Martha gave a gentle smile, stroking her granddaughter's hair. "Josie doesn't need much to be happy. She has a knack for finding joy in small things." Miles observed their interaction, noticing the evident love Martha had for Josie. It was undeniable that, despite their poverty, the girl was loved and protected. Josie mentioned you found her. Miles began cautiously. If you don't mind me asking, how did that happen? Martha took a sip of coffee, as if stalling to decide how much to reveal. I found her hurt about 2 years ago, she finally said. She was confused, scared. She couldn't even say her own name. Miles's heart rate surged. 2 years ago, the same period as Anne's accident. And before that, she doesn't remember anything. Martha shook her head. The doctors at the clinic said it was traumatic amnesia. It might pass with time or it might not. Doctors? Miles asked, surprised that there had been some medical care. I may be poor, Mr. Donovan, but I'm not neglectful, Martha said with dignity. I took her to the clinic as soon as I found her. They did what they could, but without insurance or documents. She let the sentence trail off. Miles turned to Josie, who was now playing with the straw of her milkshake, oblivious to the adult's serious conversation. Josie, he called gently, do you remember anything before your grandma? The girl frowned, an expression of deep concentration that Miles immediately recognized. Anne used to do that exact gesture when trying to solve a tough math problem. Sometimes I have dreams, she answered slowly, about water, a lot of water, and a loud noise. She shook her head. But I don't really remember. My head has holes. I only remember Grandma. Martha put her arm protectively around her granddaughter's shoulders. The doctors said it's normal. Sometimes the brain blocks bad memories to protect itself. Miles nodded, struggling to keep his composure. Water, a loud noise, like a car plunging into a river on a stormy night. This girl, she's my Anne. The thought echoed in his mind with a clarity he could no longer deny. Mr. Donovan? Martha's voice brought him back to the present. Are you all right? Yes, sorry. He took a deep breath. Miss Ellis, Josie, I'd like to help you. Not out of charity, but out of gratitude. Martha stiffened again. I told you, we don't need... Your granddaughter saved me. Miles interrupted gently. I'd like to help you now. Please. Something in his tone, the palpable sincerity in his words, seemed to reach Martha. She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to see beyond the successful businessman's exterior. What exactly are you proposing? She finally asked. Miles thought quickly. He had to be careful. If he revealed his suspicions now, he might frighten them. He needed to build trust, step by step. To start, a better place for you to live. An apartment, maybe. Nothing fancy, just something safe and dry. Josie's eyes went wide. A real house, with a bed and everything? Martha seemed torn between pride and practical necessity. Miles could see the internal struggle in her eyes. Why would you do that? She asked in a lower voice. Really just because of gratitude, or is there something more? Miles knew he had to be at least partially honest. Josie reminds me of someone I lost, he admitted. Helping her, helping both of you is like a second chance for me. Martha studied him for a long moment. Finally, to Miles's surprise, she nodded slightly. I've never asked for anything from anyone in my life, she said, her voice steady despite her contained emotion. But for Josie, for her, I'd accept your help. Still, we need clear terms. Of course, Miles agreed immediately. Whatever conditions you want to set. It's not charity, Martha insisted. It's a deal. You provide housing. I'll make sure Josie attends school regularly. School? Josie interrupted, her eyes glowing. I can go to a real school. With books and other kids. The girl's excitement over something as basic as an education made Miles's heart ache again. It was a fundamental right she'd been denied by circumstance. Yes, a real school, he confirmed for Josie, before turning back to Martha. I completely agree with your terms. Education is essential. Martha nodded, looking somewhat relieved that Miles did not question her authority over Josie. And we must keep our independence, she continued. No turning us into your charity project. We're people, not a cause. Absolutely, Miles agreed, admiring the strength of character in this woman. Even in extreme poverty, she maintained her dignity intact. If you allow it, I'd like to start looking for a place today. Martha hesitated, then gave a small smile, the first since she'd arrived. Thank you. Not for the hamburgers or the coffee, but for seeing us as people. Miles understood exactly what she meant. In a society where people like Martha and Josie were often invisible, simply making eye contact and acknowledging their humanity was a radical act. "Grandma, can I show Miles our house?" Josie asked, jumping with excitement. "I want to show him my bottle cap collection." Martha hesitated, clearly uncomfortable about exposing their precarious situation to a wealthy stranger, but the hopeful look on Josie's face was hard to resist. "Maybe another day," she hedged. "We have to get back now. Miss Rosa is waiting for the medication I promised her." Josie looked momentarily disappointed, but soon perked up again. "Tomorrow then. Will you come back tomorrow, Miles?" Before he could answer, Martha intervened. "Mr. Donovan is a busy man, dear. He has work meetings." "I'll be here," Miles assured her, smiling at Josie. "Same time, and maybe with some apartment listings for you to look at." The smile Josie gave him in response lit up the entire alley. It was the same smile Anne used to give him when he promised to take her to the amusement park on the weekend. The same sparkle in her eyes, the same dimple in her left cheek. As he watched them walk away, Josie skipping, Martha walking tall, dignified, Miles felt a certainty grow inside him. This child, with her unshakable cheer in the face of hardship, with her natural generosity that led her to help a stranger in need, was special in a way he recognized in the deepest part of his being. Even living under an overpass, scavenging metal from dumpsters to survive, Josie carried within her a light no adversity had extinguished. A light Miles knew well because he had seen it before, in his own daughter's eyes. And now, for the first time in 2 years, he allowed hope to truly blossom. It wasn't just a physical resemblance or an extraordinary coincidence. It was something deeper. "I'll bring you back home," he murmured to himself, watching Josie's small figure disappear around the corner. One way or another. 3 weeks passed after Miles's first meeting with Martha and Josie. In that time, he visited more than a dozen properties, looking for the perfect balance, a place that was decent and comfortable, but not so ostentatious that Martha would feel out of place or dependent. Something they could call home, without it feeling like charity. He finally found the ideal spot, a modest 2-bedroom house on a quiet street, with a small backyard. The house had been recently renovated, with freshly painted walls in soft tones and polished hardwood floors. Nothing luxurious, but infinitely better than a makeshift space under an overpass. On moving day, Miles arrived early. He had hired a small moving company, mostly to deliver the new furniture he'd bought rather than transport Martha and Josie's few belongings. He personally supervised the delivery of each item: comfortable beds, a cozy couch, a dining table, basic appliances. He made sure the refrigerator and pantry were stocked with enough groceries for at least 2 weeks. In the smaller bedroom, which would be Josie's, Miles took special care. A bed with a soft mattress, fluffy pillows, and a colorful star-patterned comforter. A small bookshelf for books, and a simple but functional desk for when she started school. He hadn't over-decorated. He wanted Josie to have the freedom to transform the room according to her tastes. When everything was ready, Miles went to pick up Martha and Josie at their usual meeting spot near the grocery store. Anxious thoughts crowded his mind. What if Martha changed her mind at the last minute? What if pride overshadowed practical needs? His worries vanished when he saw them approaching. Josie was practically skipping with excitement, while Martha walked with firm steps, carrying 2 plastic bags that seemed to contain all their worldly possessions. "Are we going to see our new house?" Josie asked as soon as she got close, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "We are," Miles replied, smiling. "It's all ready." Martha looked tense, torn between the relief of finally having a secure home and the discomfort of accepting help. Miles had learned to respect this internal conflict, never making comments that might sound condescending. The car ride was quiet, with Josie pressing her face to the window, watching the streets. Martha sat upright in the passenger seat, her hands firmly on the bags in her lap, small treasures that had survived hard times. When they stopped in front of the house, Miles noted the subtle relaxation in Martha's shoulders. The facade was simple, with a small porch and a modest front yard, nothing that screamed rich man's charity. Just a normal home in a quiet neighborhood. "Is this it?" Josie asked, her eyes wide. "It's so pretty." "This is it," Miles confirmed, turning off the engine. "Shall we go inside?" The three walked to the front door. Miles handed a set of keys to Martha, a symbolic gesture worth more than words could express. This was their home now, and Martha had control over it. The older woman held the keys for a moment, the metal shining against her worn skin. Then, with unexpected resolve, she inserted the key in the lock and opened the door. Josie was the first to enter, a small whirlwind of energy and curiosity. "There's furniture and everything," she exclaimed, darting from one room to another. "Grandma, come see." "There's a big fridge." Martha entered more slowly, her eyes taking in every detail. Miles stayed a step behind, letting her take her time, letting her feel the space as her own. The living room was welcoming, with a comfortable sofa facing a small TV. The kitchen, while compact, had all the necessary appliances. A dining table with 4 chairs sat in a sunny corner. "Grandma, there's a bedroom for me," Josie's voice echoed down the hallway. "With my own bed." Martha followed her granddaughter's voice, Miles trailing behind. They found Josie already sprawled on the bed, testing out the star-patterned comforter. "It's so soft," the girl declared, sinking into the pillows. "I've never lain on anything this soft." Martha gently touched the comforter, as if afraid it might vanish at the slightest contact. Her eyes met Miles's, an ocean of unspoken emotions in her gaze. "There's a room for you too," Miles said softly. "Right there." Martha's room was simple but dignified, a double bed with a firm mattress, as Miles assumed she would prefer. A sturdy dresser, a small closet, and a chair near the window. "It's more than I ever expected," Martha said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's the least you deserve," Miles replied. "You both deserve a safe place." Josie had discovered the backyard, and her delighted exclamations carried in. Martha watched from the window as her granddaughter ran around the small green space, freer than ever before. "I never asked for anything," Martha said quietly, still looking at Josie in the yard. "I never liked depending on anyone." She turned to Miles, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But thank you for seeing us." That was it exactly. It wasn't just gratitude for the house, the furniture or the food in the fridge. It was gratitude for being seen as human beings, not as social problems or statistics, for having their dignity respected, even when they needed help. "Grandma, there are flowers in the yard," Josie shouted from outside. "Can I take care of them? Can I?" A smile softened Martha's weary face. "Of course you can," she answered loud enough for Josie to hear. Miles watched the scene with a full heart. This house, this furniture, this yard, these were more than material objects. They represented a fundamental change in these two people's lives. Not just a roof, but security. Not just walls, but protection. Not just beds, but the basic right to a dignified rest. For Josie, it meant being a child again, without the burden of helping to ensure daily survival. For Martha, it meant the possibility of aging with some dignity, without the constant fear of tomorrow. "The fridge is stocked," Miles commented, "and I arranged for a local market to deliver groceries weekly. You can choose what you need through this list." He showed her an order form in the kitchen. "It's on an account I opened in my name." Martha nodded, accepting the practical help without comment. Miles knew she preferred actions to words of gratitude. "I also arranged for Josie to be enrolled in the neighborhood school," he went on. "It's 3 blocks away. We can figure out the details in the coming days." "School," Martha repeated, as if savoring the word. She's always wanted that. She'd ask when she could go. Outside, Josie had found a little butterfly in the garden and was following it intently, her face lit by the afternoon sun. For a moment, she looked like any normal child, without the weight of street life. "Thank you," Martha said again, this time meeting Miles's eyes directly. "Not for all this," she gestured around the house, "but for giving her a chance." Miles nodded, not trusting himself to speak. What Martha did not know, what he still did not have the courage to share, was that every smile from Josie, every moment of genuine childish joy, was also an invaluable gift to him. As he watched Josie run around the yard, the last rays of sunlight illuminating her brown hair, Miles felt a certainty grow within him. This child, with her extraordinary resilience and her ability to find happiness in the smallest things, couldn't be anyone but his Anne. And now she had a home again, a beginning. In the weeks that followed, a comforting routine took shape. Martha and Josie settled into their new home while Miles visited regularly, always bringing small gifts disguised as extras so as not to offend Martha's pride. A children's book here, a garden plant there, a set of pans he no longer needed in his kitchen. Josie had started at the local school. After an initial evaluation, the teachers found that despite her educational gaps, she showed a lively intelligence and could keep up with kids her apparent age with some additional support. Miles arranged for tutors to help her in the afternoons, and the girl absorbed knowledge like a thirsty sponge. The transformation was visible. In just a month, Josie had gained healthy weight, her cheeks now round and rosy. Her hair, once dull and mistreated, shone with new life. But the most significant change was in her eyes. The constant vigilance typical of a homeless child had begun to give way to a more relaxed, confident expression. Martha also flourished. She kept her pride and independence, refusing any suggestion she deemed extravagant, but graciously accepted the basic necessities Miles provided. Her hands, once rough and dry from collecting scrap, showed signs of healing. She had even allowed hiring a weekly cleaning lady, after Miles insisted it would free her up to spend more time helping Josie adjust to school. On a particularly pleasant Saturday afternoon, Miles arrived at the house carrying a picnic basket. The backyard, which Martha and Josie had lovingly transformed, now displayed flower beds and a small herb garden. It was a perfect spot for an outdoor meal. Josie ran to greet him at the door, an endless well of energy in her small steps. "Miles! Come see what I made at school." She tugged him by the hand to the kitchen table, where a colorful drawing showed 3 stick figures, one small with brown hair, a taller one with gray hair, and a male figure in what looked like a blue suit. "That's us. The teacher asked us to draw our family." Miles felt his heart clench at the word family. He glanced at Martha, who was at the kitchen sink preparing a pitcher of lemonade. "That's a beautiful drawing, Josie," he said, genuinely moved. "You have talent." "The teacher says I'll improve a lot when I have more art classes," Josie announced proudly. "I'll draw real pictures, not just stick figures." Martha approached, drying her hands on a dish towel. "She talks about school all day long. I've never seen her so excited about something." "Learning is fun," Josie declared, already running to the backyard as soon as she noticed the picnic basket. "What did you bring?" "Do we have dessert?" Miles and Martha followed her outside, sharing a secret smile at her enthusiasm. As they spread the picnic blanket on the grass and arranged sandwiches, salads, and fruit Miles had brought, a sense of tranquility surrounded them, almost as if they really were the family Josie had drawn. After the meal, Josie asked to play in the small wooden playhouse Miles had installed at the corner of the yard the previous week. With the girl now occupied, Miles finally found the moment he'd been waiting for, a chance to talk privately with Martha. "She's thriving," he commented, watching Josie arrange her rag dolls in the playhouse. "Children are amazing," Martha replied, a smile softening her wrinkles. "They adapt, they recover, sometimes faster than us grown-ups." Miles nodded, mustering the courage for a conversation he'd been putting off. "Martha," he began, keeping his voice low so Josie wouldn't overhear, "it's been a month since we met. I have to confess that I have questions about Josie, about how she came to you." Martha tensed for a moment, her eyes still on her granddaughter playing. "Why does it matter now? She's well. She's happy." "It matters because," Miles hesitated, weighing his words, "because I think I know Josie from before." Martha turned to face him, her expression now very serious. "What do you mean?" Miles took a deep breath. "When I said Josie reminded me of someone I lost, it wasn't just a casual resemblance. Martha, I lost my daughter 2 years ago, in an accident. Her body was never found." The silence that followed felt almost physical between them. Martha studied his face intently. as if searching for signs of deceit or manipulation. "You think Josie is your daughter?" she finally asked, her voice low and controlled. "The likeness is extraordinary. The age fits, and you said you found her around 2 years ago, with no memory, no name." Martha lowered her gaze, her aged hands twisting together. "Miles, many children get lost. Many have trauma. That doesn't mean—" "May I show you something?" Miles interrupted gently, pulling his wallet from his pocket. Martha nodded reluctantly. Miles opened the wallet and took out a carefully preserved photograph. He handed it to Martha, watching her reaction closely. In the photo, a girl smiled at the camera in front of a birthday cake with the number 11 in colorful candles. The same almond-shaped eyes as Josie's, the same face shape, the same crescent moon scar above her right eyebrow. Martha stared at the picture for a long time, her trembling hand touching the girl's face in the photo. "Anne," Miles said softly. "My daughter's name was Anne." Martha looked up, tears shining in her eyes. "When I found Josie, she was soaking wet, injured, like she had been dragged by a current." Her voice was almost a whisper. "It was near the river, early one morning after a terrible storm." Miles felt his heart race. The accident happened during a storm. The car fell off the Westwood Bridge. Martha looked again at the photo and then at Josie, still happily playing in the little house. Her shoulders slumped slightly, as though a hidden weight finally settled on them. "It's her," she whispered. "That's the child who appeared to me that morning." The world around Miles seemed momentarily suspended. Despite his growing certainty over the weeks, hearing Martha confirm it made it undeniably real. How exactly did it happen?" he asked, voice thick with emotion. Martha took a deep breath, her gaze still fixed on Josie in the distance. "I was collecting scrap near the river, like I did every morning. The storm the night before had been brutal. The river was high, full of debris." She paused, remembering. "Then I saw her. A small figure collapsed among the rocks on the shore. I thought she was just another discarded doll, but when I got closer—" Martha swallowed hard, the memory clearly painful. She was breathing, but unconscious, injuries all over, torn clothes, no one else around, no sign of family or anyone. "What did you do?" Miles asked gently. "What any decent person would do." "I took her to the nearest clinic." Martha shifted in her seat, momentarily defensive. "The doctors examined her. They said she'd suffered a head trauma, among other injuries. When she came to, she was empty. Didn't know her name, her age, or where she came from." "Then what?" "They called social services, of course, but—" Martha hesitated. "So without ID, with no one looking for her in that specific area, the system is flawed, Miles, and slow. She would have stayed in an overcrowded shelter, waiting for the bureaucracy to decide her fate." Miles could imagine the rest. Martha, lonely since her husband's death, seeing in that vulnerable child a chance to make a difference, to matter to someone again. "So you took her with you?" Martha nodded, a gleam of defiance in her old eyes. "I don't regret it. She needed care, protection, and I needed her as much as she needed me." "How did you come up with the name Josie?" A small smile softened Martha's face. "It was my daughter's name. I lost her to cancer 15 years ago." Miles absorbed this, understanding better the profound connection between Martha and the girl. It wasn't just charity or kindness, it was a second chance for them both. "You saved her life," he said finally. "And she saved mine," Martha responded simply. Then she lifted her eyes to meet his. "What are you going to do now, Miles?" "Take her away." The question hung in the air, loaded with implication. Miles could easily call in lawyers, prove his parentage with a DNA test, reclaim the daughter he believed he'd lost. Legally, Martha would have no standing. "No," he said after a moment's reflection, "I won't do that to either of you." Martha's shoulders visibly relaxed. "But I do think Josie deserves to know the truth," Miles continued, "or at least the possibility. Maybe it will help her memory." Martha considered this, looking again at Josie. "How do you plan to do that? She's just a child." "With honesty and kindness," Miles replied. "If you'll let me." After a long moment, Martha nodded. She likes you. She trusts you. Maybe that will help fill the empty spaces inside her. Miles took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility. Can I talk to her now? Yes, Martha decided, standing up from the bench. I'll make more lemonade. You'll need privacy. As Martha left for the kitchen, Miles walked over to the wooden playhouse where Josie was playing. He knelt at the entrance, too tall to fit through the little door. May I enter your kingdom, Princess Josie? He asked with a smile. The girl laughed. You're too big, but you can look through the window. Miles walked around the little house and bent down to peer inside the small window. Inside, Josie had arranged her rag dolls in a circle, as if they were having a party. What are they celebrating? He asked. Lily's birthday, Josie replied, pointing to a dark-haired doll. She's turning 7, like me. Miles's heart skipped a beat. 7 years old. The age Anne was when she got that scar, falling off her bike. Josie, he called softly, can we talk for a bit? Just the two of us. The girl looked momentarily disappointed to leave her game, but she soon nodded, stepping out of the playhouse to join Miles on the lawn. Can we sit over there? Miles pointed to a small garden bench under the shade of a tree. Once seated, Miles felt the weight of what he was about to say. How to explain something so complex to a child? Josie, he began, you know how sometimes people get lost, right? The girl nodded solemnly. Like Miss Rosa at the overpass, she lost her son and never found him. Miles swallowed hard, touched by her early understanding of loss. That's right, sometimes we lose people we love very much. He paused, gathering courage. 2 years ago, I lost my daughter in an accident. They never found her body. Since then, I've carried an emptiness I could never fill. Josie's eyes grew wide with childlike compassion. Your little girl died. Everyone thought so, Miles responded carefully. But I was never sure. And then what? Josie asked, as he trailed off. Then you appeared. Miles finished, his voice barely more than a whisper. And you look so much like her, Josie. Sometimes I can hardly breathe when I see you. The girl tilted her head, confused but attentive. I look like your daughter. Miles nodded, taking a photo out of his wallet again. This is Anne, my daughter. Carefully, Josie took the photo, holding it by the edges as if it were a fragile treasure. She studied the image with surprising intensity for someone her age. She looks like me, she murmured, touching the scar above her eyebrow, identical to the girl's in the photo. But I don't know who she is. Miles watched her every reaction, every nuance in her expression. There was no recognition in her eyes, just curiosity and maybe some confusion. That's okay, he reassured her, his voice gentle. You don't have to remember right away. Your heart may know before your mind does. Josie kept looking at the photograph, her eyes going back and forth between the face in the picture and Miles. You think, she began hesitantly, you think I might be her. That I might be your Anne. The directness of the question hit Miles hard. I think it's possible, yes, he answered honestly. But the most important thing is that, whether you're Anne or Josie, I care about you very much. And I want you to be happy. The girl nodded, absorbing this information with the extraordinary resilience children often show. Grandma Martha says she found me by the river, she shared quietly. That I didn't remember anything, that I had to learn everything again. Yes, she told me, Miles confirmed. She took very good care of you. I love Grandma, Josie stated firmly. She's my family. Of course, Miles quickly agreed. And she always will be, no matter what happens. Josie looked again at the photo, then at Miles. Her eyes, the same as Anne's, seemed to hold a wisdom beyond her years. If I'm your daughter, she began cautiously, does that mean you're my dad? The simplicity of the question nearly broke Miles's composure. Yes, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. That would mean I'm your father. Josie thought about that for a moment, her face serious with the importance of the conversation. Can I keep the picture? She finally asked, so I can look at it more. Of course, Miles answered, surprised and touched by the request. Sometimes I have dreams, Josie confessed softly, almost as if sharing a secret. There's a lot of water, and a loud noise, and someone shouting my name, but it's not Josie that I hear. Miles felt a chill run down his spine. What name do you hear? Josie furrowed her brow, concentrating. I don't know. I can't remember when I wake up, but it's not Josie. They fell silent for a moment, side by side on the garden bench. Miles resisted the urge to hug her, knowing he needed to respect her space and allow her to process things at her own pace. It's okay not to remember, he said at last. Memories can come back over time, or maybe they won't. Either way, you're still you. Josie looked at him, a small smile forming on her lips. If I'm your Anne, that would be cool. Because you're nice. Then, with the abrupt subject change only children can manage, she asked, Did you bring dessert for the picnic? Miles couldn't help but laugh, despite the tears threatening to form. Yes, I did. Apple pie, your favorite. How did you know it's my favorite? Miles smiled, feeling a familiar warmth filling his chest. Just a guess. As they returned to the picnic blanket, where Martha waited with fresh lemonade, Miles watched Josie run ahead, carefully placing the photo of Anne into her dress pocket. It didn't matter if she recovered all her memories or not. It didn't matter if she agreed to a DNA test or if she preferred to remain just Josie. What mattered was that she was alive. She was safe, and he had been given a second chance to be part of her life, and that, in itself, was a miracle he would be eternally grateful for. 2 weeks after the conversation in the garden, Miles proposed something he had been planning for a while. It was a sunny Saturday, and Josie was particularly cheerful as she ate the breakfast Martha had prepared. Josie, Miles began, while the girl devoured a fruit-topped pancake. I'd like to take you somewhere special today. If you and Martha agree, of course. Josie looked up, her face shining with curiosity. Where to? Miles exchanged a meaningful look with Martha, who was standing near the stove. They had discussed this the night before, after Josie had gone to bed. My home, he said. There are some things there that might help you remember. Martha dried her hands on her apron, watching her granddaughter carefully. In recent weeks, since Miles had shown her the photo, Josie had been asking more questions about her past, small fragments of dreams and sensations she couldn't quite explain. Martha knew this step was necessary, however hard it might be for her. Anne's room is still there, Miles explained to Martha, though his words were for Josie as well. Exactly as she left it. Josie looked from one adult to the other, trying to grasp the significance of the moment. Is it a trip? She asked, simplifying the situation in a way only children can. Miles smiled. Yes, a very special trip. Can I take Mr. Whiskers? Josie asked, referring to the stuffed rabbit Miles had given her the previous week. Of course. And Grandma Martha can come too, if she wants. Martha hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Yes, I'll go with you. An hour later, Miles's car rolled through the imposing gates of the property where he lived. Josie pressed her face to the window, her eyes wide as the mansion rose before them. You live in a castle, she exclaimed, clutching Mr. Whiskers tightly. Miles smiled, watching her reaction in the rearview mirror. It's not exactly a castle, just a house that's too big for one person alone. Martha, sitting in the passenger seat, remained silent, but her eyes took in every detail. Miles could sense her discomfort. The stark contrast between their realities was overwhelming. While Martha had struggled for years to provide the basics for Josie, here was evidence the girl might have once lived in abundance. It's beautiful, Martha commented at last, her voice controlled. Miles parked in front of the main entrance. Thanks for coming, he said, turning to Martha. I know it's not easy. The older woman nodded, understanding the unspoken. If Josie really was Anne, this moment represented both a potential healing and the beginning of a complicated transition in their lives. Josie was already out of the car, hopping impatiently at the entrance while the adults followed more slowly. Is there a pool? She asked, shifting from foot to foot. And a dog. I've always wanted a dog. There's a pool in the back, Miles replied, unlocking the front door. But I don't have a dog. Maybe we can think about that later. They walked into the luxurious foyer, its marble floor and grand crystal chandelier. Josie spun around in the middle, taking in every detail with childlike wonder. "It's like in the movies," she declared. Martha seemed to shrink slightly, diminished by the grandeur around her. Miles noticed her discomfort and gently touched her arm. "It's just a house," he said quietly. "Furniture and walls. You gave Josie something far more valuable than all this." Martha lifted her chin, a gesture Miles recognized as her way of summoning strength. "She deserves to know every part of life." "Including this?" Miles nodded, respecting the woman's dignity. Then he turned to Josie, who was already exploring the adjacent living room. "Josie," he called softly, "there's a special place I'd like to show you." The girl quickly returned to his side, curiosity bright on her face. Miles held out his hand, which she took eagerly. "It's upstairs," he explained, indicating the sweeping staircase. "Martha, will you join us?" The older woman agreed, following them up. On the upper floor, Miles led them down a hallway, past several closed doors, until they reached the last one. There, he paused, his hand trembling slightly on the knob. "This," he said, his voice a bit strained, "was Anne's room." Josie looked at the closed door with sudden solemnity, as if sensing the importance of this moment. Martha stood a step behind, silent but supportive. Miles took a deep breath and opened the door. The room was exactly as it had remained for 2 years, a sanctuary frozen in time. Soft pink walls, white, delicate furniture, a canopy bed with floral sheets in the center, flanked by nightstands topped with ballerina lamps. Shelves lined an entire wall, full of books and toys. A study desk near the window still held a stack of schoolbooks and colored pencils, arranged in a porcelain holder. It is her room, Miles corrected himself, the emotion clear in his voice. Josie took a hesitant step in, still clutching Mr. Whiskers. Her eyes roamed over every inch, taking it all in. "It's all pink," she whispered. "Anne loved pink," Miles explained, "ever since she was little." Martha remained at the doorway, watching Josie move slowly around the room as if in a trance. Josie approached the bed, gently touching the comforter. Then she walked over to the toy shelf, her fingers sliding over the books. She stopped in front of a row of teddy bears neatly arranged on a low shelf. Miles and Martha watched in silence, worried that any word might break what felt like a profound moment of connection. Josie lifted her hand slowly toward one bear in particular, a brown one with a faded blue bow around its neck. Her small fingers touched the bow, and then, in a surprisingly natural movement, she picked up the bear and hugged it. "I know this bear," she murmured, more to herself than to the adults. Miles took a step forward, his heart pounding. "You do?" Josie nodded, her face buried in the bear's soft fur. "His name is Captain." Miles staggered slightly, needing to steady himself on the desk. "Yes," he whispered. "Captain Brown. Han always called him that." Josie hugged the bear tighter, closing her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "I don't know why," she said, her voice choked with emotions she didn't fully understand, "but I feel at home here." Martha covered her mouth with her hand, trying to hold back her own emotion. Miles knelt down, keeping a respectful distance so as not to startle Josie. "It's okay," he reassured her. "Whatever you're feeling is important." Josie opened her eyes, still hugging the bear. "My head hurts when I try to remember. It's like there's a locked door." "Don't force it," Martha advised, finally stepping in to join them. "Memories are like skittish birds. They come back when they feel safe." Josie nodded, finding comfort in her grandmother's simple wisdom. Still holding the bear, she continued looking around the room. She stopped at the desk, her eyes drawn to a notebook covered in star stickers. "Can I look?" she asked, glancing at Miles. "Of course," he said. Everything here is Anne's." Josie opened the notebook, revealing pages of childlike handwriting, diaries of an 11-year-old girl, thoughts and feelings recorded in colorful pens. She flipped through a few pages, scanning the words without fully reading them, more like she was absorbing the essence of the notebook rather than its specifics. Suddenly, she stopped on one page. Her fingers touched a small photo glued there. Miles and Anne at an amusement park, both smiling, each holding a cotton candy. "I remember," Josie said, her voice barely audible. "The Ferris wheel. I was scared when it stopped at the top." Miles felt his world tilt. "Yes," he managed, nearly choking on the word. "Anne was afraid." She held my hand so tight it left marks. Josie kept staring at the photo, her eyes drifting somewhere between the present and the fragments of the past beginning to emerge. "There was music," she went on, as though in a trance, and colored lights spinning. Martha came closer, placing a gentle hand on Josie's shoulder. The older woman had tears in her eyes but wore an expression of acceptance. Painful but necessary. Josie suddenly turned to Martha, a new anxiety lighting her eyes. "Grandma," she asked, her voice trembling, "if I'm his daughter, if I'm Anne, will I have to leave you?" The question hung heavily in the air, loaded with fear and uncertainty. Martha looked at Miles, asking silently with her eyes. Miles knelt again so that he was at Josie's height. "Never," he said firmly. "This house is for both of you, always." But if I'm your daughter?" Josie insisted, confused. "Then we'll learn how to be a different kind of family," Miles explained gently. "A bigger family. Because Grandma Martha will always be your grandma. Nothing will change that." Martha couldn't hold back her tears now. For the first time since Miles had met her, the strong woman who had faced so many hardships allowed herself to be completely vulnerable. "Thank you," she murmured to Miles. He shook his head. "Don't thank me. You're the reason Josie, is alive. You loved her when I couldn't. That makes you part of our family forever." Josie glanced from one to the other, trying to process the complexity of the moment with a child's understanding. Then, with the simplicity only children possess, she offered the perfect solution. "We can all live here, there's a lot of space. And Mr. Whiskers would like the yard." Miles chuckled softly, while Martha wiped her tears. "That's something we can talk about," he replied, exchanging a look with Martha. "What matters is that we stay together, however is best for you." Josie nodded, satisfied with that answer. She turned her attention back to the room, still holding Captain Brown. "Can I see the rest of the house?" she asked, her childlike curiosity returning. "Of course," Miles answered, relieved at the shift to lighter ground. "Let's explore together." As they left the room, Josie, walking between Miles and Martha, each holding one of her hands, something fundamental had changed. The fragments of memory that were surfacing were like small lights illuminating a path that had been dark for so long. It didn't matter whether Josie recovered all of Anne's memories or built a new identity from pieces of the past and her experiences with Martha. What mattered was that, after so much time separated by fate, the universe had found a way to bring these three broken hearts together into a new family configuration, a family chosen by love, not just by blood, and perhaps that was the purest kind of family one could have. In the quiet of his home office, Miles studied documents spread across a mahogany desk. 3 months had passed since the day Josie had picked up Captain Brown in the pink room. In that time, scattered memories had continued to surface, small flashes of the past that the girl shared with increasing ease. Martha and Josie now occupied an entire wing of the mansion, with rooms they decorated together. The transition had been gradual, respecting their pace. Miles insisted they also keep the modest house he'd originally given them, so they would have their own space whenever they wanted. The phone rang, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was Gregory Wells, his longtime lawyer. "Greg," Miles answered. "Any news?" "Yes, and it's important." "Can I drop by in an hour?" Miles frowned, picking up on the urgency in Gregory's usually composed voice. "Of course, I'll be waiting." After hanging up, Miles looked out the office window. In the garden, Josie was playing with the new golden retriever puppy they had adopted the week before. Martha sat on a bench nearby, knitting while she watched her granddaughter. The scene of domestic normalcy still filled him with wonder. He sometimes feared it was only a dream from which he might awaken. Exactly 1 hour later, the intercom announced Gregory's arrival. Miles met him in the entrance hall, a man in his 60s, grey hair meticulously combed, wearing an impeccable suit. "Miles," the lawyer greeted him with a firm handshake. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Let's go to the office, Miles suggested, leading him down the hallway. Would you like coffee? Water? Water, please, Gregory replied, settling into one of the armchairs while Miles poured 2 glasses over ice. Once seated, Gregory opened his briefcase and took out some documents. I have the information you asked for, he began, a serious expression on his face. About your kidnapping and the investigation. Miles leaned forward. The police had been working on the case for months, but progress had been slow, until now, apparently. Detective Harris contacted me yesterday, Gregory continued. They got a break in the case. One of the men involved in your kidnapping was arrested for another crime and made a plea deal. He confessed? Yes. And not only that, he named those who planned it. Gregory paused, assessing Miles's reaction. The kidnapping was arranged by Raymond Beckett. Miles felt a chill down his spine. Raymond, his business partner for 15 years. The man who stood by him as the company grew from a small startup to a multi-million-dollar corporation. The man who had attended Anne's symbolic funeral, putting an arm around Miles's shoulders and promising to help him get through it. Why? He asked simply, though he already suspected the answer. Money, obviously, Gregory replied with a weary sigh. According to the confession, Raymond was secretly negotiating the sale of the company to an international conglomerate. They wanted to buy the entire firm, but Raymond couldn't convince you to sell your share. The meeting we had before the kidnapping was a last attempt to get your agreement by legal means, Gregory completed. When you refused, Raymond decided your removal was the only way to gain full control. Miles stood abruptly and walked to the window. From there, he could still see Josie playing with the puppy, running in circles with a yellow ball. Did he know about Anne? Miles asked, his back still turned to Gregory. I don't believe so, the lawyer answered cautiously. The plan seems to have been simply to make you disappear, maybe an accident. The kidnapping was a last-minute improvisation when they saw the empty parking lot. Miles nodded slowly, absorbing the information. For several minutes, he remained silent, watching his newly found daughter bask in the innocence of childhood. What are the next steps? He finally asked, turning to face Gregory. Raymond has already been detained for questioning. With the accomplice's confession and the financial evidence we found, the prosecutor believes we have a strong case. What about the company? Since you two were equal partners, with Raymond in custody, you automatically assume operational control. But I imagine you'll want to reassess the partnership now. Miles returned to his seat, his expression surprisingly calm, even to the seasoned lawyer. I want to dissolve the partnership, he declared. Buy out his share at fair market value. Nothing more, nothing less. Gregory jotted down the instruction, but paused with his pen hovering over the page. Miles, under these circumstances, you'd be well within your rights to force him to sell under far worse terms. I'm not interested in revenge, Greg, Miles responded quietly. He tried to take everything from me. But I got my daughter back. That's all that matters. The lawyer studied his client for a moment, genuine respect on his face. I understand, Gregory said at last, finishing his notes. I'll prepare the necessary documents. There's one more thing. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out an official envelope. The judge approved your petition. Given the positive ID via DNA testing and the extraordinary circumstances of the case, Anne Donovan has been legally declared alive. Miles took the envelope, feeling its emotional weight far more than its physical heft. And the custody status? He asked, voice tense. As we requested, the court acknowledged shared custody between you and Martha Ellis. It's not a conventional arrangement, but the judge prioritized the child's emotional well-being. Miles exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Martha deserves that. Actually, she deserves much more. The judge agreed. Her contribution to Anne's or Josie's well-being was fundamental to the decision. After Gregory left, promising more updates the next day, Miles stayed in his office, contemplating the documents on his desk. His mind was not on the legal or financial terms, but on the irony of fate. The same man who orchestrated his near death had inadvertently paved the way for him to rediscover his daughter. The sound of soft footsteps brought him back to the present. Josie stood in the office doorway, the puppy dozing in her arms. "Can we come in?" she asked, her new confidence allowing her to move freely around the mansion. "Always," Miles smiled, motioning to the leather sofa in the corner of the office. Josie entered and settled there, gently petting the golden fur. "Who was that man?" "Gregory, my lawyer, an old friend." "He looked serious." Miles nodded, always honest with her. "It was serious. Remember I told you about how I got hurt? About the bad men who left me in the old car?" Josie nodded. Over the last few weeks, Miles had gradually shared parts of his story at a pace that Martha and a child therapist had deemed appropriate. "The police found out who was responsible," Miles explained simply. "The bad person who hurt you." "Yes, someone I knew. Someone who worked with me." Josie absorbed this with the surprising capacity children have for accepting complexities that might confound many adults. "Are you mad at him?" she asked after a moment. Miles considered her question, admiring her insight. "I'm disappointed. Sad, too. But not really mad." "Why not?" "Because if it hadn't happened, I might never have found you again." Josie smiled, the sort of smile that lit up her eyes. "So it was a bad thing that turned good." "Exactly." The simplicity of her viewpoint was refreshing. Miles promised himself never to lose that ability to find light in darkness that Josie displayed so naturally. The next morning, Miles drove alone to the detention center, where Raymond awaited his hearing. The visit had been arranged by Gregory, though the lawyer questioned the wisdom of such a meeting. "You have nothing to gain," Gregory had argued, "and you owe him nothing." "It's not for him," Miles had replied simply. "It's for me." The detention center was a drab gray building, smelling of cheap disinfectant and stale coffee. Miles was escorted to a visitation room, where he waited several minutes before the door opened again. Raymond Beckett entered, handcuffed, a stark contrast to the expensive suit he still wore, now wrinkled from a night in a cell. His face, normally ruddy and confident, looked pale and haggard. His eyes, however, still held a trace of the arrogance that always characterized him. "Miles," he greeted, trying to maintain composure as he sat across the table. "I had my lawyer reach out to yours. This is all a grotesque misunderstanding." Miles studied the man he once considered a friend. How little he truly knew him. "It's no misunderstanding, Raymond. Your hired man confessed everything." Raymond visibly paled but quickly forced a nonchalant expression. "What's your angle, Miles? You here to rub it in? Or offer some kind of deal?" "There is no angle, no deal." Miles kept his voice calm, controlled. "I just came to say I know the truth." "And that you lost?" Raymond gave a bitter, forced laugh. "Lost? I'm temporarily detained, at worst. My lawyer is the best in the state. And even if I spend some inconvenient time, I still have my 50% share of the company. I'll earn more money sleeping in prison than most men do working a lifetime." Miles shook his head slowly. "You're no longer my partner, Raymond. The partnership is being dissolved. You'll get fair market value for your share, no more, no less." "You can't do that," Raymond protested, arrogance momentarily replaced by panic. "We need mutual approval to dissolve." "Not when one partner is indicted for attempted murder of the other," Miles replied simply. "Gregory's already started the process." "It's legal and fair." Raymond stared at Miles's face, searching for any hint of triumph or revenge, but finding none. "Why are you doing it this way?" he finally asked, genuinely baffled. "You could destroy me completely. Leave me with nothing." "You betrayed me," Miles answered softly, "and you lost. Because what truly matters, I got back." "What are you talking about?" "What did you get back?" Miles smiled calmly, further confusing Raymond. "My humanity, my family, my daughter." Raymond frowned, trying to process those words. "Your daughter? Anne? What are you talking about? She died years ago." "The body was never found," Miles replied, standing, "and life can correct its mistakes in surprising ways." "Goodbye, Raymond." Without waiting for an answer, Miles went to the door and knocked for the guard to let him out. Behind him, Raymond called after him, demanding explanations, answers to the riddle Miles had deliberately left unsolved. Miles did not look back. After 2 weeks later, Miles was in his office at the company, now fully under his control. Gregory placed the final stack of documents for him to sign in front of him. "It's officially done," the lawyer declared after Miles signed the last sheet. "The dissolution is recorded. Raymond's share value has been deposited into a court-controlled account. He'll only access the funds after his trial, regardless of the outcome. And the company restructuring," Gregory smiled, handing over another folder. "That's done as well. 20% of the shares were transferred to the newly created Josie Foundation. The board unanimously approved the new social direction for the company." Miles opened the folder, examining the documents that formalized the biggest shift of his professional life. The Josie Foundation, named after the name Martha had given his daughter for those 2 years, would be dedicated to supporting children in vulnerable situations and families living on the streets. "Did Martha agree to chair the foundation board?" Miles asked, though he already knew the answer. "Yes, though she insisted her role be practical, not just ceremonial," Gregory replied with a smile, quoting her directly. "I'm not going to sit in meetings. I'll work where help is actually needed." Miles nodded, satisfied. Martha had found a renewed purpose, using her life experience to guide an initiative that could truly make a difference for people who'd lived as she had. The phone rang, and the secretary informed him that Martha and Josie had arrived to pick him up for lunch as planned. "Tell them I'm on my way down," Miles answered, standing and gathering his belongings. Gregory watched him with a curious expression. "You know, Miles, in all my years practicing law, I've never seen anyone respond to a betrayal of this magnitude with so much grace." Miles smiled while putting on his suit jacket. "When you get back something you thought you'd lost forever, Gregory, the other losses seem insignificant." Together, they rode the elevator down to the lobby, where Martha and Josie were waiting. The girl ran to hug Miles the moment she saw him, while Martha observed with a serene smile. "Ready for our picnic?" Josie asked excitedly. "Absolutely ready," Miles replied, taking her hand. As they stepped into the sunlight, Miles reflected that true justice was not in punishing Raymond, but in the new life his betrayal had unintentionally allowed to flourish, a new family, a new mission, a new chance. And that was all that really mattered. Spring had arrived in full force. The Donovan Mansion's garden, once perfectly manicured but lifeless, now overflowed with color and a joyful bit of chaos that only happens when a child is allowed to help plan it. Beds of wildflowers mingled with classic rose bushes. A small herb patch, Martha's personal project, filled a sunny corner. On that particularly perfect Saturday afternoon, Josie played in the garden with Max, the golden retriever who was already almost her size, though still a clumsy puppy. They ran among the flower beds, careful not to crush the blooms she had helped plant. Martha had gone to a meeting of the Josie Foundation, something that still made her smile with disbelief. A woman who had spent years scavenging to survive now led a philanthropic organization with substantial resources. Life had curious ways of changing course. Miles was in the house, supposedly working in his study, but after 2 hours of reviewing financial reports, he felt an urge he couldn't resist. He made his way to the music room, a place he had rarely entered before Josie came back into his life. Sitting at the grand Steinway piano, untouched for 2 years, he ran his fingers over the keys, recalling almost forgotten sensations. Without really thinking, his fingers found a melody that rose from the depths of his memory, the lullaby he used to play for Anne when she was small. It was a simple composition, something he had come up with in the first weeks after her birth, during long nights rocking her to sleep. The melody had a hint of melancholy, but also carried a serene hope, like a boat gliding gently on moonlit waters. Out in the garden, Josie suddenly paused in her play. Her entire body went still, as if some primitive instinct had been activated. Max, confused by the abrupt change, barked softly, nudging the ball with his nose to get her attention back. But Josie remained motionless, her head slightly tilted, eyes half closed in intense concentration. The melody floated through the open window, soft notes dancing in the afternoon air. Josie closed her eyes fully, letting the music envelop her. Something shifted inside her, not just a memory but a physical sensation, as though her body recognized the lullaby before her mind could name it. "Wait, Max," she murmured to the puzzled dog, her voice nearly inaudible. Josie opened her eyes and, without a second thought, ran toward the house. Her light footsteps were barely audible as she crossed the foyer, climbed the stairs to the second floor, and walked down the hallway. But she did not head to the music room where Miles was playing. Instead, her feet carried her automatically to the pink bedroom, Anne's bedroom. In the months since they had moved in, the room had seen small changes. Some of the more childish toys had been swapped out for books more suited to her current age. The walls remained pink, now displaying her own framed drawings. It was a space where past and present coexisted, reflecting the two identities within the girl. Josie went straight to the white vanity in the corner. On its surface stood a small wooden jewelry box, a recent gift from Miles. She opened it with almost reverent care, though she could not explain why. Inside, resting on a blue velvet lining, was a star-shaped pendant on a delicate silver chain. The necklace Miles had found after the accident, the necklace Anne had never taken off. Josie picked up the pendant, feeling its nearly weightless presence in the palm of her hand. The silver was cold to the touch but quickly warmed against her skin. She gazed at the sparkling star, rotating it slowly to see how it caught the sunlight. And then it happened. A wave of memories hit her, not scattered fragments this time, but a continuous, powerful surge, like a dam finally bursting. Images, sounds, feelings, all perfectly vivid and connected into a coherent narrative, filling the empty spaces in her soul. The first time she got the necklace, sitting on Miles's lap on her 7th birthday. "To hold all your wishes," he had said, fastening the delicate clasp behind her neck. Evenings in the music room, curled up on the green velvet sofa, watching her father's fingers dance over the piano keys, the same melody lulling her to sleep. A rainy night car ride, coming home from a school recital, windshield wipers flicking rapidly. Miles's voice on the phone, "We're almost there." Bright lights in the darkness, a truck skidding, Miles yanking the steering wheel sharply, an ear-splitting crash of metal against metal, the world flipping upside down, the seatbelt tight across her chest, water pouring in through the windows, cold darkness, panic. Miles's voice, weak, distant. "Anne!" Anne, her small hands fighting the seatbelt, the rising flood of water, overwhelming fear, and then total darkness. Josie, no Anne, staggered under the impact of these memories, clinging to the vanity for support. Tears streamed down her face unnoticed, her body trembling, not with fear but with the sheer force of the revelation surging within her. "Anne," she whispered to herself, testing the name. "I am Anne." She looked at the mirror on the vanity, studying her own reflection as though seeing it for the first time. The same eyes she'd always had, the same face, the same crescent scar above her right eyebrow. But now she saw more. She saw all the layers of identity, the entire puzzle finally complete. Clutching the star pendant in her right hand, she dashed out of the room. Her steps resonated in the hallway as she headed toward the music room, drawn by an urgency from every cell in her body. Miles, sitting with his back to the door, was still playing the lullaby, lost in his own memories. He stopped mid-phrase when he heard hurried steps behind him. "Josie! Are you okay?" he asked, turning on the piano bench, concern written on his face. She stood in the doorway, breathing hard, tears shining in her eyes. Her small hand gripped the star pendant so tightly the knuckles were white. For a moment, they just stared at each other, a silence full of possibilities stretching between them. "Daddy," she finally said, her voice trembling. "I remember." Miles froze. Over the past months, they had grown accustomed to her gradual recollection of fragments, little flashes she mentioned casually over dinner or while playing in the yard. Everyone, Miles, Martha, the doctors, had agreed that she might never fully recover her memories, and that would be okay. "Remember what, honey?" he asked gently, afraid to impose his own hopes on what might be just another fragment. The girl walked across the room and stopped in front of him, her eyes locked on his with an intensity he hadn't seen since before the accident. Everything, she answered, her voice clear, changed. I'm Anne. I remember everything. Miles felt the world stand still for an instant. The air caught in his lungs. His hands, still on the piano keys, trembled slightly. The music, she continued, words tumbling out in a rush. You always played it before I fell asleep. Every night. And when I had nightmares, you'd come to the piano even in the middle of the night and play until I dozed off again. Miles just nodded silently, no words forming in his throat. And the necklace, Anne went on, opening her hand to reveal the silver star. You gave it to me on my 7th birthday. You said it was for my wishes, and I never took it off, except when I went swimming because I was afraid it might rust. Tears now streamed down Miles's cheeks, but he made no move to wipe them away. And that night, the night of the accident, her voice quavered, but she pressed on. We were coming back from my school recital. It was raining so hard. You were on the phone with someone, saying we were almost home, but then she blinked, reliving the memory that had been locked away all this time. Then something happened. Bright lights, a truck, the car skidded. I remember the loud crash, and then water. So much water. Miles slid off the piano bench to kneel before her, still unable to speak, but never breaking her gaze. The seatbelt got stuck. Anne continued, her voice now just a whisper. I tried to open it, but I couldn't. The water was rushing in. There was a lot of noise, then silence. I just remember floating in darkness. Then nothing. Until I woke up on the riverbank, not knowing where I was or even who I was. Miles pulled her into an embrace, holding her as if he feared she might slip away again. His shoulders shook with silent sobs, years of pain, grief, and finally relief pouring out at once. And Grandma Martha found me, Anne said softly, her voice muffled against his shoulder. She saved me when I had nothing, not even my name. She cared for me like I was hers. Miles pulled back just enough to see his daughter's face, the face he had dreamed of for 2 endless years. Anne, he managed at last, that single word carrying every emotion a human heart could hold. My Anne? She smiled through her tears, the same smile he remembered since the first day he held her in his arms. I'm home, Dad, she said simply. I'm finally home. Martha returned in the early evening to find the mansion unusually quiet. Worried, she called for Josie and Miles but got no immediate reply. It was Max, the puppy, who ran up to greet her, barking excitedly before running back to the living room, clearly wanting her to follow. There, she found Miles and Josie, no Anne, as she had started to think of her, sitting together on the sofa in a gentle silence. The girl's head rested on her father's shoulder, the star necklace now hanging around her neck. Martha, Miles said, noticing her. His voice sounded different, a mix of emotional exhaustion and deep contentment. Something incredible has happened. The older woman moved closer, noticing their red eyes, signs of recent tears. Grandma, the girl called, stretching a hand out to her. Something in her tone made Martha pause. There was a new quality there, a completeness. Anne? Martha asked quietly, using the name she rarely spoke. The girl nodded, smiling through still damp eyes. I remembered, Grandma. Everything. Martha placed a hand over her heart, sinking into the nearest chair. Everything. The accident, the river, and how you found me. Anne stood up and crossed over to Martha, taking the older woman's worn hands in her small ones. You saved me. When I had nothing, not even my name, you gave me everything. Martha looked at Miles, the question unspoken in her eyes. He nodded, confirming the unbelievable transformation. It was the music, he explained. I was playing her lullaby on the piano, and it connected somehow to the necklace and everything came back, Anne finished, like a movie playing in my head, all at once. Martha smiled through fresh tears. So you really are her, completely. I'm Anne Donovan, the girl confirmed, her voice unwavering. Then, leaning in to kiss Martha's cheek, she added, but I'm also a bit of Josie Ellis, always. Martha pulled her into a tight hug, finally allowing herself to cry, not from sadness or loss, but from relief and closure. For 2 years, she had feared this moment, worried that if Anne's memories returned, she might lose the granddaughter she loved. Now she understood there was no loss, only transformation. The following months brought their own adjustments, naturally. The Donovan mansion, which had been quiet and somber for so long, was completely changed. The smell of baking often filled the kitchen, where Martha taught Anne simple recipes. Laughter echoed down the halls. Fresh flowers from the garden decorated the tables. The music from Miles's piano once again became a household staple, now often accompanied by Anne's young voice singing along. One lovely autumn afternoon, almost a year after Anne's memories returned, Miles found Anne and Martha in the garden, gathering the last roses of the season. He paused for a moment, capturing the scene in his mind. His daughter, once lost and found, and the remarkable woman who had become an essential part of their lives. Anne spotted him and dashed over to hug him, a habit she had eagerly resumed. Now 12, she was starting to show signs of the teenager she'd soon be, but she still held on to the affectionate spontaneity both Josie and Anne had always shared. "Look, Dad!" she exclaimed, showing him a floral arrangement she had made. "Grandma taught me how to match the colors." "It's beautiful," Miles praised, exchanging a knowing smile with Martha, who approached more slowly, carrying a basket of flowers on her arm. They sat together on a garden bench, enjoying the gentle autumn sunlight. Anne played with Max a few yards away, her boundless energy contrasting with the adult's peaceful contentment. "It's almost surreal, isn't it?" Martha said, watching her granddaughter run across the lawn. "How everything fell into place, despite all the odds." Miles nodded. "You found me when I didn't even know who I was," Anne had told them once, in those first days after her memory returned. The phrase had stayed with both him and Martha, perfectly summarizing the extraordinary journey they had shared. "And you healed me when I thought it was too late," Miles replied, recalling his own words on that occasion. "Both of you." Martha smiled, her eyes following Anne's lively figure in the garden. The setting sun cast a golden glow on the girl's brown hair, illuminating the crescent moon scar above her eyebrow, the very mark that helped reunite a family shattered by fate. In that moment of perfect harmony, all three knew, without needing to say it, that they had forged something rare and precious out of tragedy's ashes, a family built not just by blood ties, but by deliberate choice, by a love that transcended conventions and expectations, a family that chose each other, against all odds. And as the sun set over the blossoming Donovan garden, the golden light wrapped around the three, Miles, Martha, and Anne, sealing a silent promise that, no matter what the future held, they would face it together, strengthened by the miracle that had brought them home. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like, because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.